first joint session of the 2017 regular session of the Alabama Legislature will now come to order. We have gathered to receive the State of the State address from the Honorable Robert Bentley, Governor of Alabama. Will the doorkeeper please admit the governor and his party?
Well, please be seated. Lieutenant Governor Ivey, Speaker McCutcheon, President Marsh, members of the Alabama Legislature, members of the Alabama Supreme Court, our constitutional officers, distinguished guests, and my fellow Alabamians. Last August, millions of Americans joined the world in watching one of the greatest demonstrations of human achievement, with its origins dating back to 8th century Greece. The modern Olympic Games are a captivating display of strength, endurance, speed, tenacity, and perseverance. With each Olympiad, we marvel at the incredible feats of physical strength on display. In these 2 weeks, we see the results of what was years, even a lifetime in the making. Athletes train a lifetime for what may be a few seconds of action. All their work, all their sacrifices are bundled up in one singular moment to feel the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. So much time, so much work, so much sacrifice was poured into the race. It must be run with precision and with determination, with eyes laser focused on the finish line, which is the ultimate goal. Each course, each race has a distinct beginning and a distinct end. And even the slightest distraction from the course laid out before them can result in a world-class athlete's crushing defeat. For the last 6 years, I have had the honor of a lifetime serving you in this great state as governor. 6 years ago, I solemnly took the oath of office to uphold our state's constitution. And 6 years ago, I personally made a commitment to the people of this state to submit myself, a humble servant, to the men, women, and children who proudly call Alabama home, to create well-paying jobs so that they can support their families, to make sure that every child has the opportunity to receive the best education, to support our most vulnerable, the disabled, and the elderly, and the forgotten, and the unborn. I committed myself to the careful consideration that all men, all Alabamians, are created equal, regardless of race and political party, gender, and economic status. I vowed never to accept a salary until every Alabamian who wants a job can get a job. This course laid out before us 6 years ago was filled with uphill obstacles of soaring unemployment, bleak state budgets, an unprecedented environmental disaster, and a natural disaster that would go down in history. Facing those obstacles head on, this race is still being run today with every bit of tenacity and endurance as when we left the starting gate. More people in Alabama are working than at any time in our administration. Alabama's labor force is the largest that it's been in 5 years. And tonight, we can proudly announce that we have now reached the milestone of 2 million Alabamians in the workforce. Running full sprint toward our goal of full employment, we are intentional with our mission to put Alabamians back to work. When coal miners in Walker County or steel workers in Birmingham were laid off, when maritime workers were needed in Mobile, our Alabama Department of Labor held a series of successful job fairs to connect jobs with our people. 500 employers ready to hire have participated in lines of job seekers often stretched out the door and down the street. As a result of those efforts, today approximately 1,000 more Alabamians have a job. Alabama's manufacturing industry is growing with more Alabamians working in that sector than before 2008. Since taking office in 2011, my administration has sought, recruited, announced, broken ground, and celebrated over 92,000 well-paying jobs for the people of this state. There is little that is more gratifying to me at this point in our administration than to see the seeds of economic development planted in a community take root and come into full bloom with well-paying jobs that feed and support families. The world took notice in Alabama in 2012 when we welcomed Airbus, the aerospace industry, to Mobile. Springing up from an empty field and by the skilled hands of Alabamians came a $600 million manufacturing facility where world-class jetliners are now being built and produced. The first Alabama-made Airbus jetliner took flight last July, and it was built by thousands of the hardest working people in the country. Companies and industries have poured over $24 billion of investment into Alabama. They've also invested in our people and in the belief that their products will be made best when they are made in Alabama. Companies like Polaris in Huntsville are building and producing ATVs and are hiring 1,700 Alabamians and creating hundreds of positions for technicians and programmers and welders. GE Aviation is investing more than $200 million to build 2 factories in Huntsville and is expected to employ up to 300 people. And it's not just our larger cities with new well-paying jobs. With an intentional focus on bringing jobs to rural Alabama, we bring industry to our smallest towns. Moeller Tech is building a $46 million flagship facility in Woodstock in Bibb County, supplying Mercedes and hiring 220 Alabamians. Alabama's automobile industry has hit another high in 2016 as workers at Hyundai and Mercedes and Honda rolled out over 1 million Alabama-made vehicles. Montgomery's new Hyundai Santa Fe, our Lincoln's new Honda Ridgeline, and Tuscaloosa's 4 Mercedes models are all taking center on the world stage. Besides receiving awards for some of the best vehicles on the market, they have one important thing in common: their homes in Alabama. We opened Alabama's newest interstate, I-22, not just providing convenience and safer travel for our people, but paving the way for greater economic development in financially strapped northwest Alabama. There is simply no place like Alabama's beautiful Gulf Coast. And the incredible Gulf State Park project is well on its way to becoming an international benchmark of economic and environmental sustainability. On track to open next year, the Gulf State Park project will be the pride of our state for outdoor recreation, for education, and for hospitality. Economic opportunity grows and thrives in our state, especially for the men and women who have sacrificed so much for our state. And yet, they ask for so little. Alabama is the home of over 420,000 veterans. And through our Alabama Executive Veterans Network, or AlaVetNet, and the Alabama Small Business Commission, we are making sure that veteran-owned businesses succeed and prosper. And today, Alabama's unemployment rate for our veterans stands at 4.1%. This percentage is lower not only than our state unemployment, it is lower than our national unemployment. Listening to and focusing squarely on the needs of our counties and our cities in 2012, we launched the state's largest investment in roads and bridges in the history of Alabama. The Alabama Transportation Rehabilitation and Improvement Program, or ATRIP, is a resounding success. The first of its kind infrastructure program is a hallmark of this administration and the tremendous cooperation that we enjoy between the state and local governments. Since the first project began 5 years ago, you've seen across our state hundreds of roads that have been improved and dangerous bridges have been replaced. Those orange barrels that you see out there on county roads, the asphalt pavers, and the highway workers that you see, and those manning the equipment on crumbling bridges and roads, these are the result of ATRIP, Alabama's infrastructure success story. There are 1,100 ATRIP projects totaling $1.2 billion on schedule for your local communities. These projects, specifically requested from local governments, are those that really make a difference in their area. 700 projects have been completed, and the effects of ATRIP reach beyond the pavement. And in fact, 94% of all ATRIP projects have been won by Alabama contractors. Now in its 5th year, ATRIP is the #1 reason that some of our contractors were able to stay in business. When bureaucracy grinds government to a halt, ATRIP has been an answered prayer for communities. If you don't believe it, just ask Marshall County. Ask them about the Red Mill Bridge. The dangerous bridge was the site of fatal car crashes. It was an impediment to the local economy, heavily dependent on local poultry farms. Chicken trucks couldn't even turn around on the road, and they were blocking access to farms and serving as an obstacle to greater overall economic development. Like many of you in your district, these were one of the projects that everyone wanted and the community desperately needed, yet no one in Marshall County thought they would ever see this in their lifetime. Beginning in 2015, our administration joined with the locals, and together last month, we celebrated the completion of the largest Marshall County project ever. And when there is an obstacle along the course of this race we run, we will find a way, or we will make one. When this race began, we launched an ambitious effort to save Alabama taxpayers money. That was an uphill climb. Alabama was essentially broke. Savings accounts had been wiped out and federal stimulus dollars were gone. But we knew there were opportunities to find efficiencies and to consolidate and to cut and to trim the size of state government and to ultimately save taxpayers millions of dollars. That is exactly what we did then and exactly what we continue to do even to this day. We launched an ambitious plan in 2012 with a goal to save $1 billion by the end of our administration. Not only did we reach that goal, but we accomplished it much earlier than expected. Alabama led the nation in our road to $1 billion in savings. And I am proud to tell you tonight that Alabama taxpayers have now saved a stunning $1.2 billion annually. This administration worked so fast and so efficiently that of the 26 new governors elected statewide in 2010, we reduced the size of our state's bureaucracy at the third fastest pace. While we've seen these successes along the course, together we have shared in our struggles. We have shared in our setbacks. Alabama is certainly no stranger to severe storms and deadly tornadoes. And in fact, we had one this afternoon in Andalusia. In April 2011, we were left with devastated and crushed and heartbroken areas of our state, and we were nearly defeated. But instead of being blown off course by these tornadoes and that tragic statewide devastation, we saw an enormous spirit of love and cooperation and kindness like we have never seen before. And we came back stronger. Neighbors across our state gave their time, their donations, and their own money to help one another. You saw it in your district. And I saw it face to face in every county that I visited. It left such an indelible impression on me, and I have never forgotten those days. Resolved to do everything that we can to protect the people of this state from that historical disaster, we commissioned the Tornado Recovery Action Council, and now we have put in place 13 of the 20 recommendations made in the track report. And we've dedicated ourselves to making our communities safer. Today, there are now 275 community safe rooms across Alabama and 4,000 more individual safe rooms. In Pickens County, in DeKalb County, in Winston County, and in Houston County, we've grieved this last year with our neighbors in their loss. And we thank God for his protection. We've held each other's hands, and we've come along beside and carried our fellow Alabamians in their darkest hour. It is that spirit of service that is the hallmark of the great, hard-working people of our state. It is that willingness to help, to sacrifice for our fellow man that we see every day from our men and women in law enforcement and the men and women who serve in the military and who protect our country. For more than 20 years, our Army National Guard soldiers have been serving as a force multiplier for the U.S. Border Patrol agencies to secure the southwest border. Twice in 2016, as Commander-in-Chief, I had the honor of ordering Alabama National Guard support to protect and defend the U.S. border with Mexico. As a result, soldiers with the Alabama National Guard and our Border Patrol recorded more than 28,000 apprehensions at the U.S.-Mexican border. Countless border turnbacks took place, and they seized 42,000 pounds of marijuana and narcotics. I am proud, and I know that everyone here tonight is proud of our Alabama men and women who proudly serve in law enforcement and in our military, especially in the active roles securing and protecting our American borders. President Trump has already taken decisive action necessary to enforce our nation's laws dealing with immigration. And let me repeat what we made clear last week. Alabama will not support sanctuary cities or institutions that harbor or shelter illegal immigrants and are in clear violation of the law of this nation. We will enforce the laws. Tonight, to members of our law enforcement community and to our men and women who proudly defend our nation and the greatest military in the world, we say thank you. The dawn of a new presidential administration has ushered in a truly remarkable time in our state's history. States and their governors are enthusiastic about the Trump administration because finally we are being heard. Concerns that we have are being met and action is being taken. States have long decried the overreach of the federal government, the unfunded mandates, the suffocating and stifling regulations handed down. From the campaign trail and from this podium, you've heard me time and time again declare my long-held beliefs in our great Constitution, the power and the authority it grants to the states. Our country is made up of 50 sovereign states, and governors like myself have stood firm while costly mandates were shoved down our throats, but we have said collectively, no more. Now, states are finally being afforded the opportunity to have a strong voice in the repair or the replacement of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. I'm a physician who cared for all of my patients, regardless of their ability to pay. Many times I would get paid in turnip greens or syrup. And while I was practicing medicine, I saw anyone who needed care. I would travel to some of the most impoverished counties in West Alabama, and I would spend the day seeing and caring for patients. If they didn't have money to pay, I would not charge them. And many times, I would actually buy their medications for them when they couldn't afford their prescriptions. But as a practicing physician, I never want anything to come between me and my patients, especially the federal government. I am licensed by the state of Alabama, not the federal government. And we'll always keep it that way. Today, as your governor, I have to be concerned for our state and the tremendous cost of accessible and affordable health care, not just for patients, but it's for our entire health care system. Last month, my governor colleagues and I candidly represented our plan for replacing the health care that hasn't proven to be affordable and has yet to prove itself to be a protection for our patients. Do we have a problem with accessible health care in this country? Certainly we do. But one-size health care does not fit all. And no one knows better than the states what it is that states need. And over the course of the next several months, it's states that will lead the way with Congress with better solutions and affordable outcomes. The strength of our states is what fuels the momentous overhaul in education reform that allows us to take back ownership of our educational rights. Alabama has taken the lead on the reauthorized federal education legislation known as Every Student Succeeds Act. It's the greatest devolution of federal power in 50 years and an incredible opportunity to bring together teachers and superintendents, early childhood educators, business and industry. The new law gives states the ability to keep the decision-making process in education at the local level. ESSA creates a role for every governor to move his or her education system from a federally mandated system to state-centric approach. Alabama wasted no time taking back control when I became the first governor to issue an executive order ensuring that it is the educators, district leaders, and parents who help determine a new direction for our schools. In partnership with the Alabama Department of Education, through a series of public meetings and forums held across this state, Alabama serves as a model for education stakeholders in the engagement across this country. We've asked, and education policy leaders enthusiastically shared their input and have a clear, strong voice in the development of this plan. States have all seen that through failed bureaucratic policies, mostly mandates on taxpayers and on federal regulation, that cripple job growth, we know that it's not the federal government that knows best. The great state of Alabama has stood for decades at the forefront of some of the most pivotal, incredible, and inspiring events in America's history. The great people who proudly call themselves Alabamians have led the way to greater innovation and scientific breakthroughs. We've inspired, we've encouraged, and we've entertained the world with a unique, rich talent, our personal achievement that just seems to grow organically from the Alabama soil. We're resilient. We're resolute. We're not a people prone to hand-wringing. We courageously confront even the most painful problems and the most overwhelming obstacles. We are a people who courageously take up arms to defend our nation's freedoms, and we're a people who courageously yet peacefully confront injustice when those freedoms are compromised, even among our own fellow citizens. Our people are brave and brilliant and beautiful. We've run our race well throughout our history. First in medical breakthroughs in 1902, when Dr. Hill performed the Northern Hemisphere's first open-heart surgery on a rural farm in Montgomery. First in the fight for civil rights, when Dr. King birthed and led a movement that signaled a seismic shift in the treatment recognition and the respect for all of our people, regardless of race, regardless of gender, and regardless of status. And when man first raced to the moon, the ones who made it all possible, who dared to dream it could not be done, or it could be done, who decided that they would heed the challenge of their fallen president to do things because they're not easy, because they're hard. These were Alabamians. These were our fellow Alabamians. We've run the race strong, yet hurdles lie on the course ahead, and we simply cannot, on our watch, allow ourselves to grow faint, to become weary, and more tragically, to lose our passion for the people that we serve. In 2016, we launched an ambitious course of action aimed at fundamentally changing Alabama and opening doors of opportunity, clearing the path to prosperity, and solving decades-old problems. Alabama Great State 2019 Plan is our strategic course of action to keep us on course, laser focused on the purpose that we've been called to carry out, the one who ordained our place in service. Great State 2019 Plan sets its sights on educating and training our people while connecting and constructing basic opportunities for all of our citizens. This bold course of action has guided and will continue to be our map for the next 2 years, specifically focusing on Alabama's 55 rural counties. We're directly addressing obstacles that stand in the way of our state's potential for greatness in education, in health care, access to technology, job growth, and economic opportunity. Once again in Alabama, we will do what we've never done before, not because it is easy, but because it's hard. The Great State 2019 plan serves as a guidepost to remind us that while we gain ground on economic growth, increased jobs, and greater control of critical decisions on health care and education, we cannot continue to ignore the problems that have persisted in our state for decades. Problems like persistent poverty that causes Alabama to be ranked as the 6th poorest state in the country. Problems that pull us from that first place woven in our great history that we pride ourselves on. Problems that drive us into dead last place in educational achievement and virtually every quality of life category, from infant mortality to obesity. Problems that, over time, have lurked, festered, plagued, and overwhelmed our corrections system. If too many Alabamians, as I said in 2016, are undereducated, undertrained, unhealthy, unable to break the cycle of poverty and dependence, then what are we doing about it? What are we doing to help children who through no fault of their own are born into poverty? What are we doing to make sure that they are well enough to go to school and to learn and to read at grade level, to learn basic math skills, matching those of their peers in other states? What are we doing to help babies who are disabled get access to life-changing services? What are we doing to help our elderly with no means of paying for even the most basic health care while we court international industry and we shake our fist in defiance of the costly federal mandates? What are we doing in Alabama to open the doors of opportunity to practically and intentionally serve the people of our state? What are we doing to mark our first place in history? And what are we doing to join the great cloud of witnesses who have gone on before us, who ran their race so well and came in first place? When we reach our finish line, will we look back and see that we were blown off course? Did we go over and around obstacles, or did we just stop running altogether? When we ask ourselves the words in the book of Galatians, where it says, "You were running so well. Who is it that cut you off?" Such distraction does not come from the one who calls us. The day we were chosen and elected, hired, and asked by the people of this state to serve them as their representatives, to be their voice in state government, we were not called for politics. We were called for a purpose. Using the Great State 2019 plan as our course plan, we will focus on the greatest needs of our state, specifically targeting and tackling the most difficult, persistent problems and strengthening and bolstering the areas where we have achievement. This year, we will launch a new effort to help put money back into the pockets of our Alabama families. One is, Alabama is one of only 4 states where there's no tax break on groceries. And this places a greater burden on our low-income families and those on fixed income. And this year, I will launch a task force to study removing the sales tax on groceries. This task force can be made up of experts from fields such as education, health care, taxation, and revenue, and the economy. But we'll study the impact of removing the sales tax on basic groceries. And the group will compare best practices from comparable states and deliver its recommendation to me this fall. Every family in Alabama should be able to find a good job, educate their children, and feed their families without being overly taxed. Every Alabama child deserves to receive the best education possible, whether they live in the suburbs of Birmingham or whether they live in the rural towns of Wilcox County. There should be no barriers to a better education for any child in our state. Technology should know no boundaries. And great state Alabama, the one that we have talked about, targets areas of our state with a bold state initiative aimed at delivering connectivity to even our most remote and rural schools. Apple spent the last year installing and updating wireless infrastructure at J.E. Hobbs Elementary School in Camden. And through a grant, every student received an iPad, and each teacher and administrator got a MacBook, and every classroom got an Apple TV. I was with those students last fall after they had received their devices. It was like Christmas morning. All the children were so excited, but probably none were as excited as a little girl named Malika. As we were leaving school that day, someone told me Malika had something she wanted to say to them. And I soon realized when this little girl was waiting to talk. You see, Malika was nonverbal and had been all of her life. Her teachers told me she was unable to speak until the gift of technology changed all of that. This nonverbal child could now virtually speak through the use of her very own iPad. Technology has opened up her world and the door of opportunity for a better education. Opportunity is not out of reach for our children. We just have to make sure that we as leaders provide it for them. We have the greatest ability to do that through what is an absolute jewel in our state. Alabama's first-class, high-quality pre-K is a proven success. Each year since I've been governor, we've steadily increased our funding for pre-K. We've expanded classrooms, and most importantly, we've opened the door to achievement for Alabama's children. There is no denying the positive results of children who attend a first-class pre-K. 4-year-olds are building on a firm foundation, demonstrating higher achievements even at the upper grade levels. We've seen these results. In study after study, a 4-year-old enrolled in one of our high-quality first-class pre-K programs misses fewer days of school. They're much less likely to be retained or held back in the higher grades. And most importantly, they're ready for kindergarten. We studied 4-year-olds when they first were enrolled in pre-K and again when they completed their year. And we found that students at the beginning of the year scored below widely held expectations. By the time they completed pre-K, though, over 90% were meeting or exceeding the expectations across the board. These children were more than ready to start school. That is why by the 3rd grade, we have found that pre-K children, especially those from low-income families, are scoring well in critical areas of math and reading. These findings show us what we really know, that first-class pre-K supports a strong foundation for school success and school readiness, and most importantly, for our state, our families, and our future success of our children. And it's closing the achievement gap for our most vulnerable children. And that's why, for the last 10 years, Alabama's first-class pre-K has been awarded the highest quality rating by the National Institute for Early Education Research. Why then would we just stop with 4-year-olds? Why don't we look beyond the undeniable success of what we can do with our 4-year-olds and expand on that success where it's most needed? Why then are Alabama third graders falling woefully behind in reading scores, when, as our superintendent of education says, we have a math crisis in Alabama? Would we not want to extend the gains that we're making with the 4-year-olds up to the elementary schools? Gina Ross, Secretary of our Department of Early Childhood Education, and State Superintendent Michael Sentence are joining forces, working side by side to align and integrate the most critical and most successful components of our pre-K model with how we educate those in kindergarten up through the 3rd grade. We know, based on the success of pre-K, the result will be higher achievement, but most importantly, children who can read and who can compete and who have a strong foundation. Once again this year, we are expanding the reach of pre-K so that even more 4-year-olds have an opportunity to a strong foundation. With a $20 million increase and 160 more pre-K classrooms, there will be over 2,800 more children who have access to a first-class, high-quality pre-K. Pre-K is truly, truly an Alabama success story. Our 4-year-olds are thriving, and we're ranked #1 in America. Not only is it transforming how students learn, it's transforming how educators teach. And I hear this from our pre-K teachers across the state who tell me that they are amazed with the results that they see among those students. Those students are excelling. Those students are thriving. And they tell me that it makes them better teachers. The success of our pre-K program wouldn't even be possible without the strong team of pre-K teachers dedicated to our children. Tonight, it is my honor to introduce to you 3 of the many first-class pre-K teachers. Chelsea Jones, Angie Dillard, and Alicia Kuntz are from Coffee County, and they're just 3 of our great pre-K teachers all across Alabama. We have the #1 pre-K program in America because our pre-K teachers are #1. Let me tell you, they are Alabama's true national championship team. Alabama leads the nation in our efforts to ensure that every person has a voice and every citizen is heard. In the last decade, the number of minorities in our state has grown. Women now make up more than half of our population, and the Hispanic population has doubled, and the black community is the 2nd largest group in our state. I've spent time with and listened to many of you, leaders and the representatives of our minority communities. You shared with me your needs, your frustrations, and your concerns. And out of those discussions came a solution to meet the needs of minorities who have little or no voice in our state government. As part of the Great State 2019 plan, last June, Alabama became only the 2nd state in the nation to establish a cabinet-level office specifically focused on the needs of minority communities. The Governor's Office of Minority Affairs offers a perspective on addressing minorities and on women's issues. And this year, we will introduce a slate of initiatives aimed at strengthening these groups. In 65 of Alabama's 67 counties, we have a shortage of doctors. Alabama ranks 40th in the number of physicians per capita, and we rank dead last in the number of dentists. Great State 2019 meets that challenge head on, and last year we took the action to stop rising rates of preventable and manageable disease, especially among rural and low-income counties, by expanding and increasing funding for loan repayment programs for health care providers. We have taken action to increase the number of doctors serving in this state's poorest counties. Having practiced medicine for 35 years and having seen the needs of patients in some of the most impoverished areas of our state, I can tell you that a good doctor in a small rural community changes a community and it saves lives. And we will increase funding for Alabama's low-income children and the youth that we have in those areas, so that they also may have access to home-based services and treatment of psychiatric and emotional and behavioral disorders. In addition, through our Great State 2019, we will increase funding for treatment for Alabama's low-income children with autism spectrum disorder. We're taking bold steps to protect the people of our state from one of the greatest, deadliest attacks in our nation's history. It doesn't come from a foreign enemy. The deaths are not the result of an unknown killer. The weapons are not advanced missiles and assault rifles or even bombs. Opioid painkillers have fueled one of the deadliest drug epidemics in our nation's history, killing 78 people every day. Overprescribing painkillers has led to a steady increase in drug-related deaths over the last 15 years. Alabama is the highest painkiller prescribing state in the nation, and non-medical use of pain relievers in Alabama exceeds the national average. This is unacceptable. And that is why in 2016, I joined 45 other governors in signing the compact to fight opioid addiction through the National Governors Association. This marks the first time in history, or at least the first time in 10 years, that governors have developed a compact through NGA to spur coordinated action on an urgent national issue. Now, in 2012 and 2013, our legislature passed and I signed into law several bills needed to fight drug abuse and particular opioid abuse. Last September, we created an Alabama Council on Opioid Abuse and Misuse. And we're going to continue to build on existing efforts to combat opioid abuse in our state. And they're going to present to me innovative ideas to help put an end to this deadly epidemic. The council consists not only of healthcare professionals, but also those who've had real experience with their families out in the real world. And they've seen the devastating effects of opioid addiction. Opioid addiction is an epidemic in Alabama and across this country. Our state's potential is too great, and our people are too precious to ignore. All of our people, the poor, the mentally ill, the addicted, and the incarcerated. Behind the razor wire fences and the iron bars and the concrete walls of Alabama's 17 major correctional facilities are thousands of men and women who also call our state their home. Now, they're there because of terrible choices that they've made, tragic mistakes, or even intended harm. For whatever the reason, the men and women are serving their sentence of punishment. They are taking up long-term and possible permanent residence in a cell block cut off from society, from their family, and from their children. But each Sunday, a group of people from the largest church in the state faithfully travel to 14 of these facilities and worship with the inmates, side by side, saint and sinner. They tune into the same church service that some of us out there in the free world may be attending. During that church hour, some of Alabama's most hardened and hated convicted criminals are raising their tattooed hands in worship. They're hearing the Word of God preached, and they're bowing their heads in solemn prayer. When church ends, and most of us in the free world go home to Sunday dinner, these inmates who shared the same Sunday service go back to some of the worst conditions in the worst facilities of any prison in the country. Decades-old buildings never intended to house triple the inmates that are packed inside. And these facilities are literally crumbling. Draper Correctional Facility in Elmore County was built in 1939, before World War II, and is still open today. Draper houses double the inmates it can sustain. The entire kitchen floor has collapsed, and repairs to a Depression-era facility are cost prohibitive, to say the least. And it's no wonder that 78-year-old pipes meant to accommodate 600 people are operating at 200% capacity. And it's not just Draper. Nearly all DOC facilities are double, sometimes triple capacity. Infrastructure is collapsing, and the tensions created among inmates and officers by the deteriorating facilities and the overcrowded conditions have even become deadly. Alabama is about to embark on a complete transformation of the state's prison system. The Alabama Prison Transformation Initiative transforms Alabama's prison system into a national model for the 21st century. The initiative will consolidate 14 of our 16 prisons into 4 large-scale, state-of-the-art regional correctional facilities. 3 men's facilities and 1 women's facility, which will replace Tutwiler for women. Combined with recent prison reform legislation that has reduced the prison population, the increased capacity of these 4 larger facilities will reduce the prison population to 125% over the next 5 years. 4 large facilities will help us save tens of millions of dollars on maintenance costs for these Depression-era buildings. We will save millions on overtime and personnel costs of officers and staff, protecting not just inmates, but our law enforcement officers as well. And the facilities will be much better able to provide proven and badly needed rehabilitation and reentry programs for substance abuse treatment, counseling, job training, and work release training, so that inmates are able to successfully transition back into our communities. Better facilities will provide better and broader rehabilitation programs, and that means inmates are less likely to find themselves back in prison. After all, it is a Department of Corrections. The men and women inside these prison walls are there for just punishment. But they are not there to slip further into a cycle of dependency and crime and violence and hopelessness. Ask those who hold the church services there every Sunday. Just ask them what they've seen. When an inmate has hope for a better life on the inside, there is a greater opportunity for restoration of families and communities and lives on the outside. Deborah Daniels can tell you that that's true. She served her time in prison. And when she was finally released, Deborah, free from iron bars, chose to surrender her life for God's glory. She thought that she was finished with a life behind bars, but God had a different plan. Nearly a decade later, Deborah is in vocational ministry serving in prison fellowship. She works closely with DOC, helping inmates with their own re-entry into society. She is active with mentoring children of prisoners and now trains volunteers to serve in prison ministry. If you wonder why Deborah would ever want to go back into a prison after serving her time, just listen to what she says. She says, "What motivates me is that my life is a testimony to others, and it's proof of His amazing grace and the vital role of the body of Christ in the transformation and the restoration of sinners." Ask Frank Gossett. At age 11, Frank started using drugs. And by the time he was a teenager, he was caught in the web of addiction to alcohol as well. His $200 a day cocaine habit led him to a life of crime and depression and attempted suicide. Soon Frank was behind DOC bars, serving time for theft. Once he was released, it wasn't long. That have been boiling and walls. Overcrowded personnel has proven to be a deadly combination. Corrections officers are outmanned by inmates, and they're stretched to their limits. And for one of our corrections officers, and I met his grieving widow. Pray. Never have to another memorial for another Alabama corrections officer. We cannot afford to wait any longer to solve this lingering, difficult, and deadly problem. It is time to get over this hurdle on this race to fundamentally can't afford the cost of transformation, ask one of our corrections officers. Ask one of our prison ministers, one of the ask a former inmate. Ask them how much their life is worth. Last fall, I had the honor of attending one of these church services inside the prison walls. I was at Kilby Correctional Facility. The church service began, the music played, and we listened to the sermon. At the end of the service, I was truly moved by what I saw and what I heard. To hear those men with gravel-deep voices in unison and out loud repeat the sinner's prayer. To see the transformation happening to them inside the prison and to see how they want to change their lives made me realize that the Department of Corrections is correcting. Still, we have to do more. If we want to truly transform the person, we must first transform the system. We must run around, over, and through any obstacle on this course and finish this race. This last year, our state has certainly faced obstacles. We faced some tragedies, and we have faced what look like impossible challenges. But it's in the quiet crucible of suffering that God's greatest gifts are given to us. Through every challenge, there's always hope. There's a young man in Northport who's saving a family from a house fire. There's a state trooper in Elkmont stopping to deliver a baby on the side of the road. There's a first responder in Birmingham risking his own life, rushing to the scene when a pipeline explodes. There's a loving community in Rosalie and in Rehoboth, wrapping their arms around one another when a tornado takes away their friends and their family. There's an elderly woman giving just $1, all she could afford, to help storm victims recover. I see our state. I hear our people. I know what we are capable of. And in the midst of Alabama's greatest challenges, I always have great hope for our great state. In the year 2019, Alabama will celebrate its 200th birthday. That year also marks the 50th anniversary of the day that Alabamians put man on the moon. I will have finished my service in office. I will have finished this race. If Alabamians could put man on the moon, we can build new prisons. If we can lead the world in medical breakthroughs, we can stop the scourge of opioid addiction. If we can win football championships, we can make sure there is a #1 ranked pre-K classroom for every 4-year-old. If we can build a worldwide movement for equality and civil rights, we can make sure every Alabamian who wants a job can get a job. We can do it. Coming alongside, pulling in that same direction. At the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, Derek Redmond was in his final qualifying round. He was competing for the gold medal. He had trained his entire life. And Redmond held, at that time, the world record in the 400 meter. A world champion. All he had to do was finish one more qualifying round before competing for the gold in his strongest event. The 400-meter race began, and Redmond was off to a strong start. But within sight of the finish line, something went wrong. Redmond felt a terrible, sharp pain in his right leg, and he collapsed to the pavement. And medical staff ran out onto the track to help him. Redmond, though, stood back up, hobbling in pain. He waved off the medical staff, limping and hopping toward the goal. By now, the other athletes had finished, and Redmond saw his lifelong dream begin to fade away. By this time, though, someone else had run onto the track behind him. Waving off security and running to help Redmond, it was his daddy. He came alongside the injured athlete, and he held him up. Redmond, still hobbling toward the finish line, was weeping, and he kept covering his face with his hands in shame. Over and over again, his daddy pulled Redmond's hands down. He said, "You are a champion already." He said, "You don't have to do this." Through tears, though, Redmond said, "Yes, I do." And his daddy said, "Then we will finish this race together." The crowd stood to their feet, the father holding his injured and defeated son made it to the finish line. Derek Redmond, a world-class athlete, trained all of his life just to see it disappear in an instant. He didn't win the gold medal. The injury actually ended his career. But Derek Redmond finished the race. The course is laid out for us in our time of service here. There is a limited amount of time, and there are many checkpoints along the way. Millions in the bleachers are watching as we serve. Some will cheer, and some will mock. They see our victories. They see our defeats. They see our struggles. But they also see our determination. And our people know who we are and what we are capable of, no matter what obstacle that we face. We will finish the race. God bless you, and may God bless the great state of Alabama.
The purpose of this joint session has concluded. This joint session stands adjourned.